Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Remi, and in today's video I'll be taking you guys through the process of making a silk top with button at the back and just some gathered details on the shoulder. So let's get right into this tutorial. So for this top, I'm using this silk fabric that I've had at home for a while. It's really nice and lush, and it's a very simple top with button at the back and gathered details on the shoulder seam. So I'm using my Natalie braid pattern for this project, and I'm starting by measuring my desired length on the back pattern. So when measuring your length for the Natalie braid pattern, it is advisable to use the back because the pattern of the back is different from the pattern of the front. So now I measured from the waist down on the back, and I'm also using that to measure from the waist down on the front to determine the corresponding position on my front pattern. So after transferring it onto fresh pattern paper, I'm going ahead to measure 2 inches from the hem down for the lower hem detail that I want, and I'm just measuring that on both the front and the back pattern. So after doing that, I'll go ahead and cut out my patterns. So I'm starting with the back, and after cutting out the pattern, I'm going in to cut out the lower part, and I'll be eliminating the dart, so basically just closing out the dart. So now I'm labeling the center back and the side back, so after cutting it out, I don't have any issues identifying which part belongs to what part. So that's it. I'll go ahead and do the same thing I just did for the back on my front pattern. So I'll be using my shoulder dart for the gathered detail that I want. So first of all, I'll go ahead and draw a straight line on my shoulder seam so it's straight without having that triangle in the middle. And now I'm going ahead to measure about ½ inch above the middle of the shoulder seam, and I'm just connecting that to the neckline and to the other part as well. So now, because I want even more volume on the shoulder, I'll be slashing this pattern to create more volume on the upper part. Now I'll go ahead and place my pattern on fresh pattern paper, and I'm just going to add 1 inch to that point. So I'll be adding a volume of 1 inch, and now I'll paste the other part of the pattern and paste it in such a way that I'm not introducing any new volume at the bottom, as you guys can see me doing here. So I'm only adding extra volume towards the top of this pattern. So now I'm going ahead to redraw that shoulder seam, making it a slight curve. And that's it. I'm almost done with the front pattern. So I'll be transferring my dart onto the fresh pattern paper as well, and I'll be redrawing the dart in such a way that it's not the angular way it is right now, that it's just a straight 2 dart legs basically. You guys will see me doing it here. So I'm just going ahead to redraw the dart. So I'll be redrawing 2 simple dart legs directly to the hem of this top, because it's not supposed to be a fitted top, so I don't need the dart to be the way it was before. I also added my seam allowance, and now I'm going ahead to cut out my front pattern. So I'll cut the center front unfold, and that's it for the front. For the back, all I need to do is add seam allowance all around. I'm using the back as it is, and I also redrew my dart for the back just as I did for the front. And that's it. The bodice is ready, or the front and the back bodice. And now I need to go ahead and work on the sleeve. For the sleeve, I transferred it onto fresh pattern paper, and I'm just going to be modifying it to add volume. So I want the lower part of the sleeve to have like a cuff detail. So I'm measuring 4 inches from the bottom, and I'm cutting out the rest of the sleeve. So for this, I'm going ahead to introduce more slash lines because I want it to be like a balloon sleeve to just have some volume basically. So I'll be introducing more volume through these slash lines. So for this, I actually did not quite do it the right way because I wasn't supposed to cut through the middle line, but I cut through the middle line anyway. So don't be like me, guys, do it the right way. But because I'm just adding volume, I just manipulated it till I got what I wanted. But yeah, you're not actually supposed to cut through the middle line. So then I'm just adding, I think, 2 inches between each slash line, and that's it. I went ahead and added my seam allowance, and I'm just going ahead to cut out the upper part of the sleeve. Don't forget to mark your notches, guys, so you can recognize which is the back and which is the front. And that's the balloon sleeve, so I'm just labeling the back and the front. And now for the lower cuff detail, I will simply just cut a rectangle, nothing too serious, 8 inches, which is the size for the lower part of my sleeve, basically the size I wanted it to be, and I'm making it 4 inches long. So I added half an inch on both sides for seam allowance, and I also added half an inch, so 4.5 inches high and 8 inches wide, or 9 inches wide. So I'll cut the lower part on fold, and that's it. So yeah, I have all my patterns, the sleeves, the body, and we can go ahead and cut out on my fabric of choice. So yeah, I have it on my fabric of choice. I fused interfacing on the cuff, so the cuff of my sleeves. And you guys can see I cut it on fold, and I also fused interfacing on the lower part of my top. So for this, I cut 2 pieces for the front and 2 pieces for the back. So to sew, I'm starting by sewing my dart, and for the dart, I'm not going to backstitch. I'll just go ahead and knot it with my hand because it's a very light material. So I find that this is easier, and it's just nicer to do it this way than backstitching it. So I'm just going ahead to sew on my remaining darts as well on the back and on the front. So now that I'm done sewing the dart, I'll go ahead and sew my center back, but I'll leave about 7 inches towards the top. And this is for the button, so remember it's going to be open at the back and then have a button loop on top. So after sewing the back, I'm going ahead to measure my shoulder seam at the back, and I'll use this to gather my shoulder seam in front as well. So I went ahead and just sewed a basting stitch on the shoulder seam in front, and I'm going on to gather it to the measurement that I got for the shoulder seam at the back, since we'll be joining the 2 shoulder seams together. So once I'm satisfied, I'm just going in to join the back and the front shoulder seams together. So I'm pinning it down, and then I'll take it to my sewing machine to sew it down. So that's it, the top is coming together really nicely, you guys can see. Now I'll go ahead and work on the lower part, which is basically joining the 2 sides together. So for the front I cut 2, and for the back I cut 2. So I'm basically going to join it together on the side and the bottom part, like you guys can see me doing here. And that's it for the front. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the back, basically just join the sides and the bottom part, leaving the upper part open because we need to turn it out somehow, and we'll go ahead and finish this with my overlocker at the very end. So I'm done with the body. Now I'll go ahead and join the cuff together. So for the cuff, I'm just going to join the 2 sides together. Since the lower part was already cut on fold, we don't need to join that. Now I'm just going in to trim it before I turn it inside out. So there I have the sleeve for my cuff. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other part. So now for my sleeve, I'll go ahead and gather the lower part so I'm just sewing a basting stitch now to gather the lower part into 8 inches. Remember, I'm using 8 inches for my cuff, so just gather this for your own appropriate measurement. And once I'm satisfied, I will go on and join the sides together, right sides together. And that's it. The upper part of the sleeve is ready. Now I'll join the 2 parts together, the upper part and the lower part, so you guys can see. I'm just pinning it down, and I'll pin it down from one end to the other. And we'll have some space, we'll have like a slit because I'm not closing the cuff, so the cuff will be left open, but just pin the lower part of the sleeve to the cuff like you guys can see me doing here. And I'll go ahead and sew it down. So I'm just removing that part of my machine so it can be easy to sew, because it's a very small circle I'm working with. So just take your time while doing this. It can be quite tricky, but it's really nice when you're done. The result is really nice. So now that I'm done with that, I'll put it aside, and now it's time to work on our main body. So for this, I need to join the lower part that I fused interfacing onto the upper part of the body. So I have the back and the front. So now I'm just going ahead to notch the middle part so I can know, the middle part, and connect it to the lower upper part of my body appropriately. So I'm pinning it down, and I'm just going to pin it down to the side. So the way I'm going to sew this, I'll sew this in such a way that the sides are open to create like a mini slit effect. I hope you guys get. So I'll pin it down, pin the back down to the side seam, and also do the same thing for the front. I'll pin the front down to the side seam as well, as you guys can see now. And I'll just go ahead and sew it so you guys can see the side is open, and that's the effect that I want. So I'll just go ahead and sew it down. So once I'm done sewing, this is the result. This is exactly what I had in mind, and I'm very happy with the outcome. So now it's time to work on the back, basically the center back that we left open. So I'll just go ahead and fold it twice, so finish that center back opening. So I'm just going ahead to pin it down so it's just easy for me to sew when I take this to my sewing machine. So I'll go ahead and sew this down, and also use a bias tape to finish the neckline. So now I'm just going in to finish the neckline with my bias tape. If you guys would like a video on how to do this, you can comment down below and I'll be happy to do that. So now the next thing is to attach my sleeves. I'm just going in to pin my sleeves down. I already have several videos on how to do this, so I'm not going to be wasting time on this. I'm just moving quickly through this part. So now all that is left is to sew on my button loop. So for this, I just got the button that I wanted to use, and I'm just putting it through the loop to determine that, okay, this loop is the appropriate size for this button. And once I'm happy, I'll go ahead and pin the loop down to my center back, and I'm just going ahead to sew it down. And that's the very last piece of this puzzle. The only thing that is left now is to sew on the button using my needle and thread, and our top is ready. So this is the end result of the top. I really like the fabric. I just like the drape. I love how it is. It's very simple, but there's just something about it. Let me know what you guys think down below. And that's it for this tutorial, guys. I'll see you in the next one.